Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we are looking at one of the newest offerings in Canik lineup, the Mete SFX. We're going to go over some specs, we're going to take a look around it a little bit, and then I'll give you some things that I like and some things that I don't like so much. Now, before we get going, the usual couple of notes. Number one, there are links to everything that I talk about in my videos on the blog links page, which is linked somewhere down in the description below. Number two, the Canik that we're looking at today has been safety checked and unloaded, and there's no ammo anywhere around us. We're not doing any modifications or alterations to the weapon either. And number three, last but not least, if you like what I'm doing here, consider throwing me that super thanks. From the guns to the ammo to the optics to the lights, everything you see on this channel is paid for out of my own pocket, so any little bit always definitely helps. Now, Canik is a Turkish company, and they're probably most well known for their TP9 line of handguns that was introduced like 2012, I think. They've been steadily refining the TP9 over that ensuing decade, and this is one of the newest iterations of the TP9, the Mete SFX. It's a full-size competition-style handgun that can also flex into a home defense or even a carry role if it needs to. Now, one thing that Canik does really well is include a bunch of extras in the box along with the firearm, and the Mete is no exception to this. There's a whole separate unboxing video that I go through everything in the box with, so if you're interested in seeing what comes with the Mete, definitely check that out. I'll have that linked like somewhere up here or in the description or I don't know, something like that. Now, as for specs, the Mete is 5.75 inches tall, not including the optic here, 8.29 inches long, and 1.14 inches wide at its widest point. This definitely makes it a full-size or like a duty-sized handgun. Canik says it weighs 31 ounces unloaded. MSRP for this thing is $575, but as usual, you can find it for less, just like any other Canik. I got this one for $400 at Brownells. Now, just a note, before we go over features, I have an optic and a light mounted to this Mete. Those don't come in the box, but I will be going over those in a separate video. So, like we just noted, the Mete's got a full-size frame, and it's got a 1913 pick rail up front for attaching accessories like this light. It's got really good texturing on the frame, especially on the front strap of the grip here, which I really like. You know, I'm one of those guys that likes a really aggressive grip. On the back side, it's got slightly different texturing, which is okay. The back straps are interchangeable, which is cool. The small back strap came installed on my unit, but I've got the medium also in the package. At the base of the grip here, we've got some beveling on the factory, like grip magwell, and Canik also includes this nice metal magwell that you see I've got installed here. The magwell just kind of slides onto the grip here, and it's secured in place with this set screw at the base. Now, moving up the frame, one of the other things that I really like is this double undercut trigger guard. So it's undercut here for your support hand and undercut here for your primary hand. And it's also got these textured indexing pads on either side of the weapon for your support thumb and your trigger finger. And they're textured exactly like the grip is. One of the key changes that Canik has made to the Mete versus the previous TP9 models is in this area right here. They reprofiled this area and they cut it up a little bit higher and kind of smoothed out this surface. Basically what this does is it enlarges this beaver tail area and it lets you get your hand further up on the frame versus the older TP9 models. It lets you get a higher grip and it helps with recoil management, because a higher grip always helps keep the nose down when you're shooting. As far as controls go, we've got an ambidextrous slide lock lever here. You can see it's on both sides of the frame. It's nice and wide. It's easy to work with, and you can get to it with a thumb or a forefinger on either side of the frame. Now, just forward of that, we've got the takedown levers here on both sides. It works just like a Glock lever. It kind of sticks out a little bit, as you can see there, and it's got some texturing on there. And finally, we've got a mag release, which is boxed off, and it's got some texturing on there. This is not ambidextrous, but it can be switched left to right for you left-handed shooters. It sticks out a pretty decent bit. You can get to it with your thumb. I've got relatively small hands and I've never had a problem hitting that mag release, so that's always really nice. Now, speaking of magazines, in free states, unlike me, you would get one 18-round and one 20-round magazine in the box. The magazine I have here, I had to buy separately because I don't live in a free state anymore. And this is the optional 15-round magazine, as you can see there. It's all metal, it's got a polymer base plate, stamped Canik on there, and it looks like it's made by Mekgar, as you can see the logo there. So we know this guy is good to go. Mekgar makes great magazines. It's also stamped Canik Superior Firearms on there. It's got a black follower, and it bears a striking resemblance to the Walther PDP magazine, which makes sense because the PDP and the Mete/TP9 are both descended from the PPQ. So one good thing to know is that if you have a PDP, your magazines will run in the Mete SFX, but you may or may not have problems with the slide locking open when it's empty due to slight variations on the follower there. Now, speaking of the slide on the Mete, we've got some front and rear cocking serrations. I really like the front ones because they stick out quite a bit, as you can see there. They're nice and sharp, and they let you really run the slide very easily. The slide also has a pair of 45-degree cuts all the way down the front and the back on either side of it. I would assume these are for lightning to kind of make it, there you can see it there, to kind of make it a little bit lighter. We've also got some weight relieving holes at the nose of the slide here, since the slide is so long. These look like compensator cuts, but they are not. These are there just to save weight on the nose of the slide. Further back, we've got a pop-up loaded chamber indicator there. So if you had a round in the chamber, this would pop up, and there's a little bit of red there, so you can see and feel that there would be a round in the chamber. And around back, there's a striker status indicator, which Canik has become known for. When you see red here, that means the striker is back and ready to fire. And when you pull the trigger, it disappears, and now the striker is forward. So it's easy to tell what position your striker is in, whether or not the weapon is ready to fire. Now, on the top of the slide, we have metal sights. Woohoo! Gotta love metal sights. So they are a 3-dot metal sight setup. There's a little bit of an angled lip on the front, if you can see that, which will allow you to catch this on like a belt or a boot or something like that if you really need to run this one-handed. They are dovetailed in and held in with a set screw in the back, just dovetailed in on the front. Just forward of the rear sight is the optic pocket, which, as you can see, I've got the Swamp Fox mounted up here. Pocket is really nice because it's cut really, really deep, and it's got some machined lugs for the optic plate to interface, which holds the optic in place. I'll roll in a picture somewhere around here so you can see that. It's kind of cool because they go in different directions, like 2 are sideways and 2 are like front and back, which I thought was an interesting design. Canik also includes 2 optic mounting plates in the box, one for RMR, one for RMS footprints. So I thought that's, also a great value adder there. One cool thing to note about the Optic Cut is that since it's so deep, most optics will co-witness, like a very, very low co-witness with the factory sights. So you can very barely see the top of the front sight when you aim down these sights, even sitting on a plate like this, which I thought was really nice. If you're comfortable with a really low co-witness, it eliminates the need for suppressor height sights. Again, that's really nice. Now, taking a look inside the Mete, we've got the slide off here. I'm not going to show you how to take the slide down because YouTube doesn't like that, but it basically comes apart just like any other Glock. You just slide it forward a little bit and lift it off. But anyway, taking a look kind of under the hood here, we see a metal guide rod with a flat coil spring, which is nice to see. It's contained so it doesn't pop out on you when you try to take it out. And we also see the Canik's barrel. Now, this is a 5.2-inch barrel. Canik does not list a twist rate, but older TP9 models have a 1 in 10 twist, so I would think this would have something around that range. This long barrel configuration is nice because it can flex between a competition and a home defense role. The longer barrel will give you a longer sight radius for competition's sake, and the longer length will also give you a couple extra feet per second in a home defense or self-defense setting. Now we take a look inside the slide, and a couple cool things to see here are more relief cuts in the slide, pretty deep as you can see. And I'm not really sure why they did that. I think these holes here are threaded on the other side for the optic mounting, but these slots here all look like they're there just to save weight, which I thought was pretty cool. Just like the PDP, the Mete runs a fully pre-cocked striker system, so this trigger area looks very similar to the PDP as well, including the trigger return spring there, as well as the trigger bar here with the bumps that will index with the striker safety. All right, now that we've got it back together, let's talk about the trigger. The trigger on Canik's has been hyped for a really long time. I've never had a Canik before. This is my first one, and I have to say the hype for the trigger lives up to it. It's great. It's, I would say, better than the PDP, which surprised me a lot. The trigger has a polymer shoe, as you can see there, and it's got a red safety blade in the middle. So if you do not depress the red safety blade, the trigger will not pull. As you can see there, you've got to pull the entire thing for the trigger to go. As far as the trigger action itself, we'll just make sure that we're clear again. There's a decent amount of take-up, kind of like a Glock take-up. There's a very light first stage of take-up that feels like a Glock, and then a slightly heavier second stage of take-up. And from there, that leads to a wall and a very short break. We'll take a look a little closer. There's a really light first stage, slightly heavier second stage, and then a very short break. Now, as far as reset goes, I love the reset because it's so short. It's right there. Like, it's so short. You can run this so fast. I love it. This trigger is fantastic. It's as good as everyone says it is. I'm so surprised, actually. I love this thing. There's no mush at all in the break. It's super crisp. It's super tactile. The trigger is not super duper light. It feels lighter than it actually is. I have to say that. I measured it out between 4.25 and 4.5 pounds, which is just about right for like a competition / duty gun. It kind of straddles the line between like the 2 or 3 pound competition trigger and the 5 or 6 pound like self-defense trigger. I think 4.5 is a perfect weight there. But it does feel lighter, especially when you're running it fast. So trigger, chef's kiss, Canik. All right, so things I like about the Mete SFX. Number one, I like the long slide and long barrel configuration. You get better performance from ammo, you get a longer sight radius for those people running iron sights, you get better feet per second out of most ammo, which in general leads to better performance, especially with like self-defense rounds. So I just like that setup in general. Second thing I like, it's a very small thing, but you all know, I'm gonna say metal sights. I love, love, love to see metal sights. Hi Glock, I'm looking at you. Please put metal sights on your guns. Metal sights are awesome. There's no need to buy co-witness sights because the optic sits down low enough in the pocket to co-witness with most optics. Even this kind of thick boy Swamp Fox sits low enough to co-witness. Third thing I like is lots of nice extras in the box. You know, they throw in the mag well, they throw in the 2 optic plates, they throw in a convertible holster, they throw in a bunch of tools and a really nice box with custom cut foam in it. For the price that you pay, the value proposition is really, really good with Caniks, and I can see why people rave about really getting your money's worth. The last thing that I like about this, it's the trigger, man. I can't stop talking about the trigger. It's just fantastic. It's surprisingly good. I was not expecting it to be that good. If you've never shot a Canik before, I suspect that the TP9 and all that stuff also have really good triggers. If you haven't shot one before, go out and shoot one. I'm a believer now. I can't say enough about it. Now, as usual, nothing is perfect, and the Mete SFX is no exception. The one major thing that I do not like is the shape of the slide. Those 45-degree cuts that we took a look at earlier, as you can see, they result in a narrow slide, and that limits the width of the optic that you put on it. This is a Swamp Fox Sentinel, and this is actually a micro carry optic. So this is like the size of like an RMR-CC or a 407K. This is not a full-size optic. And as you can see, it takes up all the room available on the slide. If you do want to run a full-size optic on this, you're going to need some sort of adapter plate. I know there are companies that make them. I don't have the names off the top of my head. I'll throw them down in the description if I find them in time. But they will hang over the slide, which isn't a huge deal for me. But okay, you're going to do the relief cuts over here. Why not leave them off over here, especially since the slide gets wider here anyway. Just leave it squared off. Let me put a big old optic on there with a big window. It's a big gun anyway. Why not? And now 2 smaller gripes. Number one, just my preferred sight setup is a blacked out rear with a high-vis front, so I would really prefer a blacked out rear sight. Again, that's no big deal. I'll just hit that with some, I don't know, like nail polish or something like that. And last but not least, the optic plates are polymer, which probably not a big deal, but other guns come with metal plates, and I'd like to see a metal plate. So those are my first impressions of the Canik Mete SFX. In general, lots to like here, especially that trigger, especially all the stuff that comes in the box. Value for money for what you get. So far, it's great. Now, as you can see, I've got an optic mounted on here as well as a light. Again, I will go over those in a separate video. I will also be getting this out to the range to put more rounds through it. I need to get more rounds through this and do a more in-depth / long-term review. Now, if that's something that you're interested in, make sure that you're subscribed. Throw me a like or a comment if you appreciate what I'm doing here, because it definitely helps me out with the algorithm very, very much. Now, coming up next on the channel, we have a very quick look at an in-the-waistband appendix rig that's light bearing for the Springfield Hellcat. So make sure that you are subscribed up for that. That's all I've got for you this time. So until next time, stay safe.